Today I'm creating a tag combining old and new products and creating custom ink blends. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. I'm here on the Altenew YouTube channel, usually on the first and third Saturday of the month. If you like my videos, I'd love for you to subscribe. So let's get started. This is the new set that I'm using today, which is Bouquet of Poppies. As you can see, it's absolutely huge, but very, very beautiful. So I'm taking the larger of the images. There is one large image with lots of poppies, like a bouquet of poppies, and then there's two separate poppy images as well, and lots of sentiments. I have cut two tags from classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock using the Terrific Tags die set. I'm then taking the stamp, and because I know that I'm only going to be using a small area of this image, I wanted to figure out where I was actually going to stamp it. So it looks a little bit odd, me kind of picking up the stamp here and adding the tag behind, but it's giving me a really good visual guide of where it's actually going to end up stamping. So then I can pop the whole thing on the stamp wheel here, and that sticky mat is going to keep that tag in place. So I can bring in the top flip plate of the stamp wheel here, pop that down, so that's going to lift up that stamp, and then it's going to keep that tag in place. And I can just make sure, press that down really well, make sure that that's not going to shift anywhere. I'm then taking Obsidian Pigment Ink and inking up this stamp. I did end up inking up a lot more of it than I really needed to, but it is quite difficult sometimes to actually see which parts of the image are going to be stamped and which are not. I really love this black ink. It's really lovely, crisp black ink. It does take a little while to dry because it is a pigment ink, but it doesn't take too long compared to other pigment inks on the market. So I really love this one. I can then pop the flip plate down, and my stamp, as you can see, is overhanging the sides of the stamp wheel. So I'm just going to take my time here, make sure that I really press that image down well, just in case it's not going to press down perfectly, because I can't kind of push that flip plate all the way to the bottom as I usually would. But it did stamp really nicely. I can then lift off that flip plate, and then I've got my stamped image here on the tag. And while I've got my stamp wheel out, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I've got the new slim grip mats here. These are to be used with kind of like sort of rubber stamps, so like the thicker ones, but what is great is you can actually place it behind your sticky mat in the stamp wheel, and that's going to give you those grid lines, so it's really helpful to make sure that things are straight and everything like that. So I'm gonna probably keep this in the stamp wheel now, but I hadn't used it yet at this point, so that's why it wasn't in there already. I can then just bring in a piece of black cardstock to stamp my sentiment on. So this is using an older set which is called Sentiments and Quotes. You can see that my set has yellowed quite a bit. This might be because it is very, very old, quite a number of years old at this point, but also sometimes where I had my set up before, I did get some sun onto my stamps, which isn't great, it's not ideal, and it can damage them, but thankfully I did catch my stamps in time, and I now have them behind glass doors, and they're kind of away from the sunlight. But that is one of the downfalls of having sunlight in your craft room, but it hasn't damaged the stamps whatsoever, and I really wanted to use this stamp set. This was one of the first stamp sets that I bought from Altenew, like a sentiment set, and I still really love it today, and I do often use it. So I've got the sentiment that says "You are amazing," and I'm stamping that down with some embossing ink. The embossing ink is a clear sticky ink, so that when I add this embossing powder on top, it's going to stick to it. So I like to apply the embossing powder a few times, tap off the excess, make sure that I get really nice coverage of that powder. I can then heat set this powder until it's completely melted, and I do like to heat set from the front and the back of the cardstock. That's to try and prevent a little bit of warping of the cardstock, but also make sure that I don't overheat that powder. And I am just going to set that aside and cut that down into a strip. I can now add some colour onto my tag. And I'm using the Bouquet of Poppies stencil set. So inside the guide it tells you which stencils you need for which part of the image. So I can place the first stencil on top, and I'm just kind of hovering it in place to start with, and then once I'm happy with the placement I can press that down. So that sticky mat underneath, this is the one that I use for ink blending. You can see that it's really well loved. That sticky mat is going to hold the tag in place and also the stencil. So none of them are going to shift while I'm doing the ink blending on top. And I thought today that I would kind of create like a custom ink blend. This can be done in different ways, but I'm going to show you how I decided to do it today. So I'm taking my lightest yellow shade. This is Citrus Burst from the new Pocketful of Sunshine fresh dye ink collection. This was out before in the crisp dye inks, it's now just been released in the fresh dye inks. And I'm taking one of the new micro blending brushes. I absolutely love these brushes. There are two sizes in the set, and this one here is the larger size, but I love it because I'm very clumsy when it comes to ink blending, and I often go outside of the edges, like onto another image. So having these tiny brushes is really helpful to make sure that I get the ink exactly where I want it. I'm now taking Rouge, which is from the Red Sunset fresh dye ink collection, and I'm adding some of this kind of corally colour into the centre of the petals here. So the yellow is on the outside and the red is in the centre. So I'm using the smaller brush in the micro blending set for this because I don't want as much of that kind of red corally colour. To blend those two colours together, I'm taking Maple Yellow. This is from the Pocketful of Sunshine collection as well. And I'm taking the larger of the two brushes that I've been using from the micro blending brush set. And I'm just blending that in between the two shades, and this is creating a lovely orange shade for me. I definitely could just grab an orange ink and have kind of probably got a similar look by using orange and yellow shades rather than the reds and the yellows and mixing them to create orange. But I don't know why, I find that there's something so lovely about creating your own custom colours, and I feel like they just blend a little bit nicer together as well. I'm not sure why, but I like doing it. I'm then taking Crimson, that's also from the Red Sunset collection, and I'm adding a little bit of that into the centre of the petals just to darken them up a little bit more, and it's going to give some really nice vibrancy to those petals as well. So I can remove that first stencil there, and then I can bring in the second one. So there was 3 layers for the petals of the poppies for this particular image. So again, I can just do the same thing, adding that light citrus burst around the outside edges of the petals here. Then I can go in with the rouge. And this doesn't look particularly nice at this point, it's not well blended, but once I go in with that maple yellow, it does seem to blend everything really nicely together. So here's that maple yellow, and I just love the orange shade that it creates. Anytime that I'm taking the brush to the right hand side, I'm just dabbing off the excess ink off of the brush. I've got into the habit of doing that, and I do find that it gives me a slightly smoother blend. You can definitely do that on the lid of the ink pad, but I'm one of those people that just doesn't really like to have their ink pad kind of casing too dirty. That sounds silly, but you can actually reuse it if you do it on the ink pad rather than taking it off onto a scrap piece of paper like I do. So just finishing up with the last stencil here, and then I can remove that, and I've got those poppies all coloured in, and like I say, I really love the vibrancy of these shades. I'm now bringing in the stencil for the leaves, and this one also has the centres of the flowers as well, so I'm using the maple yellow for that. Just adding a little bit into the centre there of all of the flowers. and then I can go in with the Green Valley Fresh Dye Ink collection. I'm so delighted that this has come out in the Fresh Dye Ink collection now. I use these greens all of the time. They're just one of my favourites because they're very vibrant and they do work really nicely with a lot of different colours, and I think they especially work really nicely with the shades that I used for the poppies. So I'm going in with the lightest shade here, which is Firefly, and I'm using the larger of the two sizes of the micro blending brushes. I can now go in with the grass field, and I'm adding some darker colour towards the base of the leaves, and then that kind of bit in the middle I'm just going from one edge, so kind of like the left edge, just to add a little bit of dimension onto those leaves. And then I'm finishing off with Shadow Creek. I didn't end up using the darkest shade in this collection, that Mountain Pine. I thought that they were quite dark as is. There is another layer for these leaves, but I decided not to use them today. I thought I quite liked the leaves just with that base layer of colour. So I can remove that stencil, and then I've just got that last little leaf there in the bottom left hand corner to use. So often I do tend to use newer products in my projects because that's kind of what comes out and that's kind of what maybe you're excited by. But I love combining old products with new products. So this is an older die. This is the Fancy Thanks die, and I absolutely love it. It's got those lovely kind of flourishes on the tea in particular, what I really like, and then it's got that long bit on the bottom of the K as well. I just think it's really pretty, and I thought it would work really nicely for the sentiment on my tag today. So combining the old, so I've got this die here and then also the accompanying sentiment, and then I've got the new with the poppies as well. So I really love combining the old and new, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you tend to gravitate towards new products, or do you often combine the two? Sometimes I would make a card just with older products as well, and sometimes I'd make a card with just like maybe new products, but I do love combining them both. I think it's really quite nice to have something old and new on a project. So I cut that thanks die 3 times from black cardstock, and I'm now just layering them one on top of each other to create some dimension. This is going to overhang the sides of the tag, so I do want it to be quite stable, so that's why I wanted to add a few layers of this cardstock. Just making sure that everything is lined up nicely. I do like to keep the kind of bottom layer in the kind of positive portion of it, or the negative I suppose, just to make sure that everything lines up nicely. I've then taken the other tag and I'm just adding some glue tape onto the back of that, and then I'm going to sandwich the 2 tags together. This is going to again give me a little bit of stability to the tag, but it's also going to make sure that I've got a nice clean area to write a personal message on the back of the tag if I want to. I can then take some black twine. I'm popping that through the whole of the tag, and then I can tie that in a bow at the front. So it's just going to take me a little while here just to get the size of the bow, and I want to make sure that that's really well kind of tied together as well, so it doesn't loosen or anything like that. And then I can just cut those tails down with some scissors. I can then bring in my sentiments here so that I can see where I want them to be placed before I stick them down. This sentiment is going to cover quite a lot of the image, but I felt like it kind of made it look a little bit more like a background, and then the focal point is the actual sentiment itself. So I can cut some instant dimension foam tape down, and I'm going to add that onto the back of the You Are Amazing sentiment strip. I can remove the backings off of that foam tape, and then I can pop that down onto the tag. I can then add some glue onto the back of the thanks die, and I want to make sure that I don't have glue on either side because that is going to overhang the tag. So I'm just figuring out here how much it does actually overhang, and I can afford to add a little bit of extra glue there. I just want to make sure that it's really well stuck down, but I don't want you to be able to see the glue from the back of the tag. I can then grab my tweezers and then I can pop that down onto the tag. Just trying to make sure it's as straight as possible. And then once I'm happy with the placement, I can grab something heavy, place that on top while the glue dries. And so that is the tag finished for today. Because of the overhanging sentiment, I would either add this onto a card or onto a gift. But I really love how it turned out. I love the vibrancy of those colours and also combining the old with the new. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.